Welcome back to the show, everybody. I'm Jeanna.
And I'm Evo.
Happy Friday, Evo.
Happy Friday, Jeanna.
It's been a couple of weeks since we've done this.
Yeah.
So today we're talking about generational wealth with a focus on, primarily people of color, because that's what we are. And this conversation kind of spawns off of a TikTok video that I saw that doesn't necessarily speak exactly about generational wealth, but it had me thinking about generational wealth. So I'm going to give you like a little synopsis of what the TikTok was about so that maybe people can understand why this got my wheels turning. So I saw this TikTok where a guy duetted another person's video, and if you don't know what duet means, it basically means one video starts and then someone cuts it and then it goes to another content creator. And the first video was of a guy going, bro, if you're 18, you need to move out of your parents' house, and it cuts to a black guy and he starts saying, don't do that. If you have a home to house your children, let your children stay there. He was like, I didn't buy a house as big as I did to tell my kids at 18 that they have to leave. And I completely felt him on that, because that's something that you and I did, which is we bought a home to house our entire family. We have 3 children, and now we actually have one of our children's partners also living with us. We have a full house, and it's one of the best feelings for me. I don't know about Evo sometimes. And I honestly couldn't imagine it any other way. I could not even fathom having my children leave this house to go out to struggle. So the reason why it got me thinking about generational wealth is because when I went into the comments, because that's what I do, a lot of people were talking about how this happens a lot in families of color, that they're in an environment when they're growing up and when they get to a certain age, primarily 18 or sometimes even earlier, where they're being pushed out of their homes and they're out there struggling to make a life for themselves. And I firsthand can identify with that, because I left my house at 18 and I struggled for a very long time, and I couldn't even wrap my head around the concept of what the hell generational wealth was to begin with. And that's because I was just trying to survive. So the thought of building for my future did not come until recent times. So I thought it would be cool for us to talk about like what generational wealth means, what it can do for your family, what it can do for you, and maybe how you can embark on it. Even if you're not a person of color and you don't have that information readily available, I thought it would be interesting for us to talk about it from our perspective and maybe some information that we can give.
So what is generational wealth to you?
So you and I actually kind of spoke about this previously. Kind of got into a debate a little bit about it, but I said to you, I thought generational wealth was something that could be passed down to your children, whether it be tangible or non-tangible. So tangible would mean assets, financial, money. And then I consider the non-tangible knowledge and your education to them, which basically is knowledge. So that's how I defined it.
What I said to you was, by definition, generational wealth is passing down of an asset to the next generation, whether it be, what is an asset, right? Whether it be stocks, bonds, real estate, a business of some sort. But it turns out that is a very old definition of generational wealth. And there's kind of a new way of thinking when it comes to generational wealth and what it means to pass on generational wealth. And that is more of the mindset of what you described.
Oh, so I wasn't wrong.
You
left that part out.
There was some truth. I thought I'd save it for the episode.
Oh, shit. You got me.
There was some truth to what it is that you were saying. They're, being able to pass down education so that the next generation is able to make better decisions about their future would be considered a type of generational wealth.
Yeah, and that would be what I would say, that it's the non-tangible. Like, you actually can't, unless you're writing it down and handing it to them, but if you're verbalizing it to them, it's, you can't touch that.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to assets, there is a Webster's dictionary definition of what assets are. I mean, assets are things of value that are tangible, but knowledge is also valuable too, and some would consider knowledge to be priceless
I would agree.
and an asset in some cases to be passed down. And depending on what the knowledge is, I mean, it could really set your family up, open doors for them that otherwise other people, wouldn't be able to open.
Mm-hmm.
So the information can be very valuable, and I can, so it definitely can be considered a form of generational wealth.
Okay, cool. I feel good about that then. Thanks.
So wealth, in other words, also can be defined by the amount of assets that a person has, a community has, a company has, or a business has. So I guess the big question is, do we have or do you have the ability to pass down generational wealth to your children? And I feel like this term, generational wealth, can weigh heavy on people at times. A lot of people may think that they don't have anything to pass on, so therefore there is no effort to do so. But I feel that depending on what your mindset is and how you live your lifestyle, may determine on whether you have something to pass on to the generation that's following you. So if you're the type of person that lives above your means, then it's going to be hard for you to acquire anything or to build any assets to be able to pass down to the generation that follows you. Some people may feel like they need to be wealthy, like wealth needs to be in their family in order for them to be able to pass down generational wealth. And because they don't have it in their family, there's nothing to pass down. So they, kind of like check themselves out of like the whole ability to be able to do so. But I mean, what is wealth, right? Wealth is having an abundance of something. Now, when you look at it like that, anybody who's living below their means is in abundance of whatever it is that they have coming in. So, yes, absolutely, without a doubt, you have the ability to pass down generational wealth to your children. Even if it's in the form of a stock or a couple stocks that you bought that pay dividends. May not pay much, may not make, life-changing financial difference in somebody's life, but it's something. It's something that generates money. It's something that's worth value, and it's something that you can pass down that your generation can build off of. So I think it's important to be able to look at yourself to know that even though you may not be able to pass down generational wealth in the aspect of what you think it is, right, where you're passing down
assets, like physical assets,
or just an enormous amount of money that's life-changing to somebody, right? Know that at some point, that idea that you have of this enormous amount of money that needs to be passed down from one generation to another to be able to be considered generational wealth started at zero somewhere. There was somebody somewhere in that family before the generational wealth ever existed in that family that started putting pennies together, that maybe saw some other family that had wealth and wanted to acquire that for their own family and started this momentum of building generational wealth. It's called generational because it takes generations for it to actually be a thing. Mm-hmm. So you may be the seed that starts to grow within your own generations to come and pass that down for the generations to come after you.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Regarding the seed aspect, because that was something that you and I kind of bunted heads on behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that all seeds start at the same position? The inception of the seed. So I guess the argument is the chicken before the egg before the chicken. So I guess what I'm asking you is, different seeds grow in different environments and they have different because those environments can be different. Some of the environments that some of these seeds may have an inception of are more harsh than others. So do you think that all seeds start out with the same, like 0?
No. I mean, all seeds. So do I feel like all seeds start off with 0, right? Do I feel like? So I guess what I just want to be clear. You're asking me, does all generational wealth, no matter which family they come from, do they all start at 0?
Yeah, because you started off by saying like there was the seed and somebody put their pennies together, and that's, generations later becomes wealth.
Right.
So those pennies that are being put together by that seed, are all those seeds starting off the same?
I like to believe that at some point, yes. I like to believe. Let's take, and I don't know this for a fact. I'm just using this as an example. But let's take like Rockefeller, right? A well-known name, generational wealth. If you had to ask yourself, where did that family's wealth start from? Was it they just magically were born into it from the start, from the beginning of the bloodline? Did the bloodline just from the first inception was that they were just rolling in wealth? I would like to think that somehow it was created at some point. So at that point, it was 0.
Okay.
So that's just my theory on it.
No, I asked you this question because I think you very well know that I feel the complete opposite about that.
Yeah.
I feel that not every seed is starting at 0. I think some of the environments that these people are beginning upon their generational wealth journey starts off very different for very different people, whether it's the beginning or not. So that's why I wanted to just ask you what your thought process on that was.
Well, I believe what you're speaking about is someone being born into money.
No. That's not what I mean.
And then I'm not understanding what it is that you mean by some people are born into. I'm sorry, can you say that again?
So, I guess what I was asking you is, I wanted to clarify that you believe that when the process of generational wealth begins with whichever family member it is, they start at 0. They create something that generations later creates that wealth.
Yes, at some point they made the decision to start making choices that will benefit their family. They start making choices that will benefit their family. And so that is ground 0 for the trajectory of the generational wealth in that family.
Okay. But then I asked you, do you believe that every beginning starts the same? Like everybody's beginning is always the 0 is always the same for everybody. And you said yes.
It just depends on what you're defining as 0. I mean, it's what I call 0, I call the first choice. The actual first choice within that family to start making decisions that will benefit the generations to come. At some point, somebody decided to make a choice that changed the trajectory of that family's, finances.
Yeah. So then you gave the example of Rockefeller, of how did the inception of the Rockefeller dynasty basically start? It started one Rockefeller somewhere down the tree line, because I don't know the history accurately. Someone down the line decided to make a choice that changed the trajectory of their life. So I guess what I'm getting at is that every inception and journey, whether it starts at 0 or not, is not the same for every person. In my eyes, by any means, because some people who, using Rockefeller for example, even if they started with nothing, there were certain barriers that were not put in place to prevent them to create that trajectory. Where there are some families that when they want to make that change, there are things put in place that prevent them from creating that trajectory. So their journey from zero to wealth is very different.
Yes, I never said that their journeys were the same. I just said that they all start at zero.
So this is where you and I got into it, and I said, I don't believe they're beginning to be zero. I believe them to start on a plus, because they're afforded different opportunities even from their zero.
I'm speaking financially. Like finance, like as far as numbers wise goes. I'm not talking about the opportunities that are presented to that person throughout their lifestyle based on wherever it is that they're born or where they live. You know, how some people are more oppressed than others based on, you know, geographically where they reside. I'm just talking about whenever the decision was made to start doing things that financially benefited the family generationally. That at some point there was nothing moving forward for the family. Like there was nothing being decided to be passed on to the next generation at that point. So as far as generational wealth, that at that point it was zero.
Yeah.
So that's the point that I was.
Well, I believe that there are some families that they at zero will make that decision to try to implement that change and then never make it out of zero.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, of course.
So I don't believe that everybody starts off at the same zero. So that's why I was saying the environment. I asked you, regardless of the environment, is the zero the same? And you said yes. And I know for a fact that the zero is not the same, especially depending on the environment. So if we're even gonna talk about it like on a metaphorical basis, if you're thinking about one plant versus another or one seed versus another, if you put the same seed and you put one in the desert and you put one in a very fertile soil, the growth of them is going to be very different. So to me, that inception of that seed is not the same, even though it may be the same seed. That thought of change is not the same.
My point is that they all start at a seed.
I get that,
but that's the point that I'm trying to make. This is the point that I was trying to make to you.
Yeah.
It was a usual question that you asked me earlier, is that they all start at nothing. Whether one flourishes and one struggles and, you know, and grows up in an environment full of infestation and weeds, you know, and, you know, doesn't have any nutrients to aid it in its growth, and it grows like almost nothing, as where the other one skyrockets. That's totally just situational based on the environment that seed is in.
Well, I wouldn't consider it situational when it comes to actual people. I think there are actual things put in place that make it so that they are not successful in obtaining generational wealth. So I don't want to divert the conversation too much. I was just wondering.
Really? Okay.
I want to make that clear that even when I are on different planes on this, but that's okay. I think it's great for us to have a difference of opinion, because then these conversations are born this way. But well, continue for me.
So I guess what I was saying was that, you know, I was trying to list examples on ways that you can pass down generational wealth without thinking that it needs to be something monumental, without, you know, separating yourself from this idea that in order to pass down generational wealth to your family, you need to be loaded, or you need to have had generational wealth passed down from you, you know, to you from your family. The idea that, you know, that people feel that without that they can't do it, they're robbing themselves and their children the opportunity to have anything passed on to them by just thinking that they can't. And what the examples that I was given, as far as, you know, living below your means, just by living below your means, you'll be in abundance of the money that you're bringing in. So having an abundance of money, you'll be able to buy certain things that may benefit your children that you can pass on, and that will be generational wealth. Now, not everybody has that chance. Not everybody can live below their means, right? So another thing that you can pass down, which is to what you were mentioning before, is education. If you don't have the means to financially put money aside, then at the least educate yourself on finances. If not for your children, for you. I think everybody should do some type of self-educating on finances so that they can manage their money in a way that benefits them. That knowledge in itself is something that can be passed down to your children, because a lot of kids aren't spoken to about finance.
And why do you think that is?
I think that money is a hard conversation to have. And I think that if you're not good with money, it's hard to have a conversation with your children about how to manage money.
That's a very valid point.
So
But do you think that there's an additional reasons as to why children are not having conversations with their parents, or parents having conversations with their children about financial literacy?
I believe that, again, speaking about money is in some cases considered taboo. You don't talk about money. And for some parents, answering questions that they may not know the answer to their kids about money may be difficult. So therefore, again, if they're having trouble managing their own money, it's probably not something that they're going to just openly talk to their kids about. But that's why it's important to self-educate yourself on money. Especially if you have kids and you don't have the means to pass down quote unquote generational wealth. Know that knowledge is priceless. And that's something that you can acquire for yourself, even in the simplest ways. If you're just managing your savings account and your checking account in a way where, you're never bouncing a check, where you're budgeting yourself in a way where every month you have what you need to get by. My parents didn't teach me budgeting. My parents didn't teach me about checking accounts and things like that. So learning these things and then having an open conversation with your kids about it, I think is important, because it creates an environment where in the future they feel comfortable coming to you to talk about these things. Any questions that they may have, they'll know that there's been open conversation in the past between you and them on this topic, and feel more comfortable in coming to you to speak to you about these things. But it starts with you. It starts with you as a person.
Okay.
So I just really wanted to point these things out, because I know for a long time in my life, I felt like generational wealth was just something that wasn't in the cards for me.
I feel the same exact way.
I didn't have generational wealth passed down to me per se, and in the literal definition of it. My father was a man that with a lot of money, but he didn't manage it in a way where he was able to acquire assets and things like that to pass down to his children. So, he didn't have the education that one would have in order to structure those things properly. He just made a lot of money. He took care of his family. He made sure that everybody had a roof over their head and clothes on their back and food in their mouth and everything that they needed in the present. But as far as like setting up things that will benefit families for the generations to come, it just didn't happen. So I started to kind of go on this journey on how can I make that change? And what I found was that this stigma of generational wealth is something that is passed down, in the truckloads, was false. And that there's so many things of value that you can pass down to your kids, even if it's not valued immensely in dollars.
So I slightly disagree with you about your father passing down generational wealth, because you and I see generational wealth slightly different. And I think because your father did what he did and made the money that he did and was able to house you, feed you, and care for you, it allowed you to get an education. You had a home to live in. So that did the one thing that I talk to you quite often about. It gave you this freedom to explore life in a way that some people that are just surviving don't have the opportunity to explore. So I feel like that is, to me, one of those non-tangible things that your dad gave to you. And I think about how when you worked with him, you saw the ways that he was managing his business. It like sparked this thing in you to figure out financial ways to improve upon business. But because you guys were working together and it started with the creation at home and your loyalty to him, you had this like freedom to explore that world. Not to say that it was easy, but you had it. And I almost kind of feel like that's generational wealth. He bred this environment that gave you that freedom. And I don't know what that's like. And I look at that and I'm envious because it gave you something. I feel like it gave you like a head start. Somewhat.
I can see why you find value in that.
Yeah.
And not to take away from that.
And I know something traditional,
in
but
the aspect of how we're speaking about generational wealth, we're talking about passing things on of value, right?
Yeah.
So my dad, in many ways, he taught me how to be strong, but not by teaching me per se, but just by being who he is and me trying to find my way in life and using a lot of his actions as examples to make good decisions for myself.
yeah.
We never sat down and had like conversations about life and, or him trying to figure out some of the struggles that I was going through and help me navigate through them and pass on knowledge to me through, through those one-on-one conversations. He taught me a lot about the business that he owned, but he needed to, because when I went to work for him, again, going back to what I was saying, he knew how to work. He knew how to do great business as far as person to person, but as far as financial management,
Yeah.
he always
It's kind of suffering in that
he always
area.
had somebody else doing that for him.
Yeah.
He always was paying somebody to do it or had somebody else running his numbers and stuff like that. So when I came to work with him, I was at that time the first family member that took control of that.
And if I'm not... No, you were the second. I was going to say the one with a college education. You and your brother.
No,
Your
so
older
I
brother.
was the first one from my father's side to ever graduate college, to get a degree.
Johnny.
Johnny got himself a certificate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I would consider him also
Yeah,
educated.
no, he
though.
went to school and
Yeah.
got himself certified, and I think that's the path that he chose to add value to his life. And I don't think that I don't know if at that time the college degree was something that was of value per se.
Yeah.
So when I decided to go to college, that at that time, getting a degree was very valuable. So it just turned out that he didn't have one. That wasn't the route that he took, and because I took that route, I got to like carry that torch of like the first family member.
But shout out to Johnny,
that
because
had a degree.
Johnny's the one that took Evil to see the school that he went to.
Yeah, he's the one. He went there. He got a certificate from there, and it just turned out that when I went there, they turned into a university, and so I was able to get a degree from there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was because of him, because of his constant always seeking me out, just wondering what I'm doing, always trying to get me to go places with him and stuff like that. He's had me to take a ride with him to to the university, and I ended up signing up.
That's dope.
One of the best rides I've ever taken in my life. So yeah, thank you for that, Johnny. Yeah, so that's kind of like my gist on some of the things that one can do to pass on generational wealth to their children. If they thought that they couldn't because they had this idea that it had to be some juggernaut of an inheritance, know that it's not that. And I just wanted to kind of shoot off a few ways to pass on generational wealth.
Oh, okay.
One is to write a will. For whatever it is that you have a value, and just make sure that you write it in accordance to your state regulations so that that will stands up to whatever the law is in that state. Another thing is, if you have a pretty sizable estate, if you have some assets, set up a trust if you don't have one, because a trust is going to be able to allow your family to inherit your assets without directly personally inheriting them. If anyone knows, when you inherit something from somebody passing, there is a death tax that you get on that inheritance. Mm-hmm. So setting up a trust is one way to avoid that tax, because you're not personally inheriting it. The trust inherits it, and you become a beneficiary of that. There is a legal way to structuring that, but that's just one way of doing it. And if you haven't done that for you or your family, that's one thing to look into. Another simple way of passing down generational wealth is just naming beneficiaries on your accounts. If you don't have a will, you don't have a trust set up, at the least put a beneficiary on your account. So that way it's not left up to probate if you pass. For those who don't know, probate is when you don't have a will, you don't have a trust, you don't have a beneficiaries named on your account, you don't have anything as far as...
When you say account, you mean bank account?
Bank accounts, yeah.
Okay.
Financial accounts, investments accounts, anything that's financial that has value to it. If there's no beneficiaries on the account, then it goes to probate. The state takes over it, and they have to decide who gets it, and that can just be a headache. And the bottom line is just to educate yourself. Educate yourself and do proper planning is the best way to pass on generational wealth.
I love that you said to educate yourself. I think it can be kind of hard for people who don't have the time to educate themselves. So I would love to share some outlets that I seek on a, I would say, daily basis. These two people come up on my feed quite often on TikTok, and they help me better understand the world of finances. So one of the people that I'm talking about from TikTok is Glenda Baker. When she's talking about real estate, she's not just specifically talking about it in Atlanta. She talks about how real estate works as a whole. Her TikToks are so easy to understand, and they're so digestible that I have learned so much when it came to interest rate, what PMI means. Not to say that I didn't know some of that stuff before, because even when I do own a home, so we had to understand some of these terminologies. But if I'm being 100% like open, you kind of led that horse when it came to us buying the house because of Evo's investigating into the financial world, having had ran a business. And personally, I mentally and physically almost could not digest that information. I had a lot going on with my career, so it was really hard for me to understand that concept.
Plus, I did mortgages for a couple of years.
So I will say that I entrusted in my husband at that time to steer us in the right direction, and I did later on understand these terms, but she really opens them up in a way where I feel like if you're going to buy a home for the first time, or you further want to understand real estate, or you really want to understand the world of just home buying and what that means and what that could mean for your family, a lot of her TikToks, Glenda Baker on TikTok, a lot of her videos are super helpful, because right now we're living in a world where real estate is flipped upside down, and it can be really hard to understand why the interest rates are so high, why there aren't homes available, what does that mean for the next generation. So I think she is someone that you could look to that could maybe even start you off on your journey of understanding real estate and understanding home buying. And then maybe you could find something else and you can kind of branch off of that. So she's my number one. And when we decided to talk about this, I knew I wanted to mention her. And then the second one is someone on TikTok also. I think they both have Instagram and TikTok, but I follow them on TikTok. Is a commercial banker, and their TikTok is actually Alexis and Dean. So it's his wife. She records him. The reason why she decided to do this, when she realized that they would have these conversations about his financial world, and she said to herself, this information is so valuable, I want to put it out to the world so that people can benefit from it. And that's exactly what happened, because one of the first videos that I watched of him was he was talking about how to use credit cards the right way. And I've had credit cards for a very long time, but the way he explained it totally flipped my brain about how to use credit cards. And I then immediately implemented that, and I'm already benefiting from cashback that I wasn't before.
And you're already passing this information down to your
children. Yes, because I had an understanding of credit, but I had an understanding of it the way that I saw it being done from my father, which was basically you have a credit card and you pay it. And you don't spend more than you can afford. And that's all I really understood. So that has kept me from accruing massive amounts of debt. Yes, but I never really understood how credit worked and how I could make it work for me. So Alexis and Dean on TikTok, and Glenda Baker. Check them out if you want some financial literacy that will feel like a good starting point for you.
Could you touch on one of the ways that you helped our son with their credit?
The first conversations that I started to have with him about credit were, one, I wanted to know if he was interested in getting a credit card, because I think it's a big responsibility to understand credit. I explained to him why it was important to have credit, and FYI, we're talking about our oldest son. And I explained to him the benefits of credit, why it's important to have credit, because in the future, if you want to make purchases that you need credit for, it's better to start early to build your credit. So are you interested in getting a credit card? And he said no to me. And I just made sure that throughout the following years, I every now and then checked in, and I was like, hey, they have this new credit card out. It has this amount of percentage cash back. And now they're also offering savings in conjunction with this credit card, and this is what this can do for you. So I was like always just kind of just dropping little hints at him about what credit could do for him, how it could help him build for his future, and how credit can make money for him for his future.
Yeah.
So I would just drop these hints, and then beautiful story, he goes out and he decides to dive deeper into credit and what is the whole credit culture and the whole credit world to understand for himself. And he went out and he got himself his first credit card. And he then sent it to us in our family group chat, and he said, this is what I got. And then we were like, oh my God, we're so proud of you. And that same day, I was like, hey, when you get home later today, can we sit down and talk about what it means to have this card? And I would love to know what the benefits are of this card. We did that. We had that conversation. He then sent us more information about the cashback that he's getting and how he can use it. And I was like, you know what? This young man understands credit. We also had the conversation about how to manage it correctly with your checking. And then these are things that I've recently learned, like in the last 5 years, because these are not conversations that my parents had with me at all.
Right.
So I feel so fortunate that we're able to give it to our children at this time when they're just embarking on their credit journey. Because when I was his age, I effed my credit up real quick, like from jump. I got a credit card and I was like, $500. I'm maxing this out today. Because to me, I was like, oh, then I'll just pay the minimum balance. And then it's kind of like, I looked at it like it was layaway. Mm-hmm. That's not what credit is. And it will bite you back real quick. So that's been his journey, and I'm really excited to see where he goes forward with it. But I want to say that the first time that I realized how important generational wealth was, I was at work one day on set, and I was having a conversation with a young lady, young white girl. I would say, and I say young in comparison to me, she was in her late 20s, and we were talking about her working in the position that she was in. And I was like, oh, you know what got you into this? And she said that she went to school for film. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. Where did you go? She went to Columbia. It's like, wow, that's a dream of a school. What do you want to, do you want to continue down this route that you're on? And she was like, I honestly don't know what I want to do. I was like, wow, that's rough. I know that feeling of not knowing what it is that you want to do with your life. She was like, but, I'll figure it out eventually. I have some time. I was like, yeah, until those student loans get you. And she was like, oh no, my parents paid for my education. And I remember I felt like that scene from Fight Club when he was like, we have just lost cabin pressure. Because she had that one thing that I talk about all the time. She had freedom. Mm-hmm. She had financial freedom from her generational wealth. Mm-hmm. Her parents were able to provide her with something that gave her the freedom to explore life. And I remember just saying to myself, wow, that's a beautiful thing, number one. Number two, how can I do that for my kids? I don't have the assets that her parents may have, because I further into the conversation, I wound up that they lived in the Upper West Side of Manhattan. So I was nowhere near that. Mm-hmm. But I said to myself, how is it that I can set my kids up to have that same financial freedom? And I realized it was through knowledge. Mm-hmm. And that was the way that I was going to give it to them. So then when you asked me what it meant to have generational wealth, I felt like if I educated myself on what it meant to have financial literacy, I can then pass that on to my children. And sometimes I could be a little annoying about it, but I'm going to do it because I remember all the mistakes that I made. If someone would have just said to me, hey, if you do it this way, you can prevent these mishaps. So I really wish that I would have learned these things earlier, because when I was a young adult, I was living paycheck to paycheck. I could not think that far ahead. And because I couldn't think that far ahead, it took me until my late 30s, early 40s to really grasp the world of finances. And I don't know a lot, but I know so much more than I did 20 years ago. And I think that if my parents could have sat down with me and just gave me little snippets of even just how to like really use a credit card or really use a savings account, or how to like maybe embark on purchasing a home other than just save your money, I think I would have potentially been in a different position.
Oh, absolutely.
So building lasting wealth involves creating a plan for how it will be transferred and passed down to the next generation. So I feel like you and I are building a plan, and part of that plan was to buy this house. And I want to give credit to a couple people. So the first person is my aunt. And the reason why I say that is because when we decided to buy a home, she was the only other person that we knew in our circle of family that owned a home. So she was the first person that we called. And we were like, we need a mortgage broker. She set us up with, till this day, I think is the most bad ASS mortgage broker that, not that I've met many mortgage brokers in my life, but
I've met a lot.
Okay, so this man, Marvin.
Yeah, hats off to Marvin.
Okay, Marvin Rosenberg took us from 0 to 100 in baby steps, but never made us feel like we were stupid. He was just like, I'm going to make sure that you have all of the buying power that you should have to buy a home. So we are going to lift up every rock to make sure that there's nothing wrong with you and Evo's financial history, and we're going to put all your ducks in a row, so when you're ready to buy, you're going to get what the hell you want.
Listen, what I can say is that I've worked with a lot of mortgage brokers, and I've seen a lot of deals die at the table because of oversight.
Correct.
Whether for whatever it may be. And it was the first time in my life that any mortgage broker has ever said to any client that I've ever seen, and in this case, to us, that we were going to be able to sleepwalk through our closing. Those were his literal words. He says, Evo, you and your wife are going to sleepwalk through your closing, but you got to let me do what I do. And it took a while.
Yeah.
And we let him do what he does.
I feel like it took 18 months, almost 2 years.
It wasn't. No, we had to do some credit repair and stuff on our end, right? But it wasn't until after that I felt like he should have gave us a pre-qualification to go look at a house. He kept telling me, when I give you a pre-qualification, you can confidently go look at houses and know that when you pick a house, that's the house you're going to get, and we're going to sleepwalk through the closing. There's not going to be no threats of hiccups and stuff like that.
And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
When I tell you we found a house and we closed in exactly the time that they said we were going to close, no hiccups. It wasn't like, oh, send us more of these documents, this, that. No, it was 0 to 100 with this man. Still to this day, we've been in our house almost 8 years. He still sends us emails, and I will forever be thankful for him. So that's the second person. The third person is our realtor, Saeed.
Yeah.
And I can't even remember how we wound up upon him, but what I will say is this.
I know how we wound up.
Okay. Not that that's not valuable to the conversation, but I just want to say why I want to shout him out is because Saeed was a man of color. And one of the reasons why I love looking at homes with him is that he never made me feel like anything that I said or my wants or my needs were going to be ignored. And I never felt like he was going to stop us from looking in a neighborhood, in a place, or the house that maybe wasn't where we should be. I felt so comfortable with him, and I feel like he really understood us, because when we walked in this house, he turned and he looked and he went, "This is it."
Yeah, this is it.
He was right.
There was never no pressure from him as far as, like,
Yeah.
you know. So I mean, I would imagine that some realtors, they really want to close a deal, and they might try to, like, you know, finesse their client into like liking a property by pointing out lots of good things. He never did any of that. You know, he's like, "This is it. How you feel about it? Do you like it? It's all right. All right. Well, then this ain't it. You know, let's go." And we looked at a lot of houses in a short amount of time, and you know, he worked around our schedule, which was great, and showed us a lot of properties within a short amount of time with an immense amount of patience.
With all that being said, I wanted to give us and our audience some statistics, because, you know, early in the episode I asked you, did you think that everyone who starts at zero starts the same?
Okay.
And so we also spoke about some of the ways that you feel like you can educate yourself, right? You can make some changes to your banking, like put some beneficiaries. You said some things that I thought were great, but they were definitely, like, I don't want to say red flags, but they made me think of these statistics. So the first one about making a beneficiary on your banking. That's to say that someone actually has banking available to them or knows how to properly bank. So according to a study from the Boston Consulting Group, about 47% of Black and Latinx households were underbanked in 2021. If you have that much of a population in the Black community underbanked, even the simple tools like compounding interest, and such as you spoke as beneficiaries, and things that people the things that people understand are not going to be readily available. Without these tools, it can be very difficult to help money grow and generate that kind of wealth and transfer it to future generations.
When you say underbanked,
yeah. So
what do you mean by that?
There are many people in the Black and Hispanic communities that are actually not well versed into how to properly bank. So they use other forms of banking, such as, what are those things called? Because I used to use one.
Check cashing places?
Check cashing places. And there was one other example, and I forget it off the top of my head, but it's an avenue where some people from these communities don't understand how to properly utilize a bank. So they're using places like a check cashing place that's then applying fees on top of their money, which then puts them at more of a disadvantage. And if they then do bank, these things such as compounding interest, which you and I have spoken about, but it's not something that a lot of people understand, because, like I said earlier, my parents didn't tell me anything about money. All I really knew was to save. I didn't understand how to save with compounding interest.
Well,
so even if you put your money in a bank, that doesn't mean that that is going to afford you the opportunities to transfer generational wealth if you don't really understand the full grasp of how to bank properly. So that's why it's saying that these communities are underbanked.
Okay. I'm just referring to even if you have just a checking account,
okay,
or a savings account.
So this is probably going to be potentially information to people that people never knew.
That's hence why I was giving the information.
I know. So that's why I said that when you said that
you said it raised a red flag.
Yeah, because when you said it, I was like, there are some people that probably don't even know that they can do that with their checking account. Thus, it leads right into the statistic of people in our communities being underbanked. They don't even understand the full privileges of their banks available to them.
Okay.
You get what I'm saying?
This term underbanked is new to me, so I'm having a little bit of a hard time wrapping my head around it.
Well, You learn something new every day.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So, an additional statistic that I wanted to share, because we talked a lot about home buying, is black homeowners also must contend with lower home values, which can result in less profit for their home sales and put tools like home equity loans out of reach. A 2021 Brookings Institute study estimates that black-owned homes are undervalued by 23% for a total of 156 billion of lost wealth in the total across the United States.
Black.
Black-owned homes are undervalued by 23%.
Okay. I'm just a bit confused by that statement
Sure.
because black-owned homes. It's usually something like that is affected by the geographical location of the home. So but the way that the statement said it, just black-owned homes in general. Like if you just own a home and you're black, your home's undervalued.
Your home, listen to what it says, black-owned homes are undervalued. So that means when you go, and then it says,
okay.
listen
No,
to, yeah.
you know what? I think I know what you're saying.
Let me finish what I'm saying and then tell me if I'm leading into what you think I'm saying. So they contend with lower home values, which in result is less profit for home sales and tools like home equity loans. So when black homeowners are going to a bank or to a place to potentially maybe pull out equity or to maybe acquire some sort of loan, they're receiving home loan values 23% lower.
Okay. I get what you're saying now. Yes,
Okay.
I did see something online where someone they recorded a video of them getting an appraisal on their home, and they basically de-blacked their house. They took down all their pictures and anything that in the house that represented their ethnicity and
Or their race.
their race. Yes, thank you. And they clearly stated, I ain't even doing nothing. They were taking down anything in their home that showed any representation of their race. And they said that the reason they were doing this was because when the appraiser came, they knew that there was a tendency to get a lower appraised value on your home if there were any signs of being black owned.
Correct.
So aside from your statistic, I have seen stuff on that online about something like that being true.
So that being said, the journey of generational wealth is always going to be, sadly, still at this current day and age, because these statistics were from 2021, which was only 2 years ago. Still at this current day and age, that means that when a person of color is attempting to gain generational wealth, there are still roadblocks in play to prevent them from gaining generational wealth. So the work that they have to put in is going to be always harder.
Right. This is true, and it's very unfortunate. But keep in mind that there is, whether the home is appraised at $100,000 or whether the home is appraised at $50,000, the fact of the matter is that if they're passing it on to the next generation, they're passing on just generational wealth. The issue that you're speaking about is an issue that's separately on its own a problem. But the ability to do so, just to be able to do these things, to pass on generational wealth, I think is very important. So in it's unfortunate that that these disparities exist, but I don't think that should be a deterrent to say that, like, don't do it.
No, I would agree. I think you still should seek the avenues that could potentially put you in a position to gain generational wealth and put yourself in a place to give generational wealth, whether it be in an asset or knowledge, as we spoke.
Yeah.
But I will say, I think it's bigger than it being unfortunate.
Okay.
So
for lack of a better term,
yeah,
it's just the way that I'm describing it. It's like I said, it's a very big problem, and I mean, there's obviously people have discovered ways around it. For example, the example that I just described, which was somebody was taking down all of the stuff, so there was no evidence that the home was black owned, so that it can be appraised with an unbiased appraisal, and then that person was actually getting the true value of their home.
yeah,
So
but
they found a way around it. But that's besides the point. Just the information that I was given was on a very basic level
yeah,
for people who may feel like they have nothing to give. Know that you do have something to give, even if it's not to the degree which you think that it should be. There is value in it, especially if you instill value in it and pass it on.
I still firmly agree with that. I just wanted to make sure that I make it a point to say, because I said at the beginning that this is about generational wealth, with a focus on people of color, that I don't think everybody who starts from zero has the same chances. And because some of the people that start from zero, their chances are harder, it can very well likely prevent them from gaining generational wealth as a whole, because it can be such a deterrent that it will discourage someone to the point because they become so frustrated or feel so defeated at being able to overcome those hurdles, where the person walking next to them that doesn't have those same blockages is walking at a totally different pace than them.
Right. Just to be clear, this statement never stated that they have the same chances. What I stated is that they all start from zero.
And again, like I said, I totally agree on that. I just wanted to make clear that everybody knows that not everybody starts the same. If I could even put a visual representation to this, if anybody has ever seen this video that has circulated on social media, on the internet, it's a video where they line up a bunch of kids and they start to ask questions like, do you have both of your parents at home? If you do, step forward. And the kids that do, they step forward. And then the next question is, are your parents still married? If they are, they step forward. Do one of or both of your parents have a college education? Then whoever has stepped forward. Have you ever gone a day without a meal? If you haven't, step forward. So they ask all these questions, and all these kids are the same age, and they all go to the same school. And at the end of the series of questions, they realize that even though they go to the same school, they are the same age, they live a very different life and have very different advantages. And if you watch this video, the majority of the people in the back are coming from home, are people of color, and the majority of the people in the front were people that were white, and they had a lot of the things, they were able to answer yes to a lot of the questions. So I feel like that's what I'm trying to convey here. Not to say that you don't get that, and I know you do, but I just wanted to stress that point.
But can we agree that anything that was ever created started from zero?
Yes, and I said multiple times that I agree with you on that.
Okay.
Okay.
I just wanted to be sure.
So, that's what I have to add. And I would just like to say that I am a 43-year-old woman that was a single mother, had 2 kids by the age of 22, knew nothing about I had no financial literacy other than don't spend more than you make, which did help me because I learned how to budget very well. And I consider myself pretty good at that. So that's a good starting point. So if you ever feel like passing on generational wealth to your children seems like such a huge mountain to climb, just know that I started at zero and I was able to work my way through. It took some time, but I feel like I'm there and I'm passing on this knowledge, and we hope to pass on actual assets. So I want that for my community. So that brings us to the end of the episode.
We're going to the cards?
We're going to the cards.
All right.
By the way, I hope you guys like my new stickers. That's me healing my inner child. Because if anybody knows anything about Lisa Frank, I wasn't getting none of them stickers, so now I give myself all the stickers. I think, I don't know who went first last time, so you go first.
If you could have a magic wand, what would you want more of in your life?
Oh,
I'm sorry. What would you want more of in your sex life? Sorry, I left that that important detail out.
if I could have if I had a magic wand,
Yes.
what would I want more in my sex life?
Let me get out my notepads real quick because I'm going to take some notes.
What would I want more of? You would think that I would have it, but I don't, because this is gonna sound fucking cheesy, but I'm very well satisfied in that area. More of?
You know, you really haven't expressed anything, any desires or anything for a very long time outside of where things are right now.
I know, that's why I'm like, what? Maybe like 10 years ago I'd have been like, well, you know.
Yeah.
What do I want more of? What do I want more of? What do I want? I don't want to make this too long. Maybe
I know what you would want more of.
tell me, because honestly, I don't really have anything, and I know people are gonna be like, shut the hell up.
It would be nice to have more of just one-on-one, like alone.
Oh yes, oh my
Yeah.
God, yes, alone time, because we like live in. We started this episode by saying there's like 6 of us in this house.
Yeah.
I would love that.
Yeah.
You 100% right. Like just you and me,
That's it.
Yeah.
Nobody else for miles around.
and that's very PG. I like that
Yeah.
answer, but it's the truth. On a scale of 1 to 10, how messy are you to live with?
On a scale of 1 to 10, how messy am I to live with? I'm gonna put myself at like a 3. I'm not a neat freak by far. I'm not super organized, but I wouldn't say I'm like the messiest person on the planet.
I was gonna give you a 4.
Okay.
So you're not way off.
Yeah, we're right there.
All right, cool. So that brings us to the end of the episode. Like I said, I hope you enjoyed our conversation today. Until our next Friday on Spark Talk Fridays, where we're having conversations about life. Peace out.
Peace out.